My daughter once called building security to throw me out of her home. Yes, my own flesh and blood. I stood there in the marble lobby clutching a family photo while strangers stared at me like I was a trespasser. My daughter's voice was ice cold. She doesn't live here anymore. And as the guard's hand touched my arm, I thought my heart would burst from the humiliation. But what I discovered next changed everything. I should start at the beginning. I wasn't born into wealth. My life was built brick by brick with calloused hands and sleepless nights. I grew up in Queens, married my high school sweetheart, and thought we'd grow old together. But fate had other plans. My husband died young, far too young, leaving me with a daughter to raise alone and a mountain of responsibilities on my back. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, days at a bakery, nights cleaning offices. I gave up my dreams of art school because diapers, rent, and food were more urgent. People said, "You'll wear yourself down," but I didn't care. My daughter Evelyn was my whole world. I remember sitting at the kitchen table counting pennies for her school supplies, whispering promises into the dark. "You won't want for anything, my girl. I'll make sure of it." And I did. She went to private schools, then college, then married into money. All because I sacrificed everything. When she invited me to move into her Manhattan penthouse after I retired, I thought it was a reward, a blessing. My daughter said, "Mom, you deserve the best. Come live with us. You'll never be lonely again." I believed her. I wanted to believe her. At first, it felt like a dream. The building had chandeliers in the lobby, velvet carpets, doormen in crisp uniforms. The penthouse itself had glass walls with views of the skyline. From my window, I could see the Empire State Building glowing at night. I thought, this is it. After all the pain, I finally get to rest. Her husband Daniel was charming on the surface. He shook my hand firmly and said, "We're glad to have you here." But I noticed the flicker in his eyes, a hesitation. I brushed it off. Maybe he wasn't used to sharing space. Then there was my granddaughter, Chloe, sweet, innocent, full of giggles. She would curl up beside me on the couch as I read her bedtime stories. She loved when I made my old recipes, pot roast, apple pie, the things her mother grew up eating. At least, at first she did. Life seemed normal for a while, too normal. But little cracks began to show. One evening I offered to cook dinner. Evelyn smiled tightly and said, "Mom, we usually order in. Daniel doesn't like heavy food." I laughed it off, cooked anyway, and set the table. They picked at their plates, exchanging glances. "Thanks, Mom," my daughter murmured, but her tone wasn't gratitude. It was annoyance. Another time I told Chloe stories about her grandfather. She was fascinated, eyes wide, asking questions about the man she never met. But later that night, I overheard Evelyn scolding her. "Don't let Grandma fill your head with sad old stories. You need to focus on the future." The words cut me, as if my memories were worthless. Daniel started making comments too. "It must be strange, living here without paying rent." He said it with a smile, but I knew what he meant. I wasn't a guest. I was a burden. Still, I tried to ignore it. I told myself they were just stressed. Manhattan life was fast, after all. Maybe they didn't mean it. But the distance grew. Evelyn no longer asked about my day. She snapped if I corrected Chloe's manners. My cooking was dismissed as too greasy. My clothes were called outdated. I started to feel like a ghost in my own daughter's home. One evening, as I was folding laundry, I stumbled across something odd. A letter. It was half crumpled, probably meant for the trash. It was from a contractor about renovations. "Once the old woman's room is cleared out, we can proceed with the new design." My blood ran cold. The old woman, that was me. I confronted Evelyn gently. "Honey, what does this mean?" She laughed too quickly. "Oh, Mom, you take everything so literally. We're just planning some changes." But I saw the flicker in her eyes, the same flicker I'd seen in Daniel's. They didn't want me there. I pushed the thought away, convincing myself it was paranoia. After all, this was my daughter, the little girl I once carried in my arms. She wouldn't betray me. She couldn't. But more signs appeared. My jewelry began to disappear. Not the flashy kind, just sentimental pieces from my husband. His wedding band, a gold chain he gave me on our anniversary. When I asked, Evelyn rolled her eyes. You probably misplaced them. You're getting forgetful. Forgetful. The words stung like a slap. Was she painting me as senile now? I noticed Chloe repeating her mother's words. Mom says you don't understand how things work anymore. She said it innocently without malice, but it broke something in me. My granddaughter, once my shadow, was slipping away. The walls of the penthouse began to close in on me. Every glance, every whisper, every sigh reminded me I wasn't welcome. And yet, I clung to hope. I told myself, they're family. Family doesn't abandon you, but family does. And soon, I would find out just how cruel my own blood could be. Because one night, after a heated dinner where I dared to mention the money I had once given Evelyn to help buy this very apartment, the mask came off completely. She slammed her glass on the table and snapped. Stop living in the past, Mom. You don't own anything here. You're just living here for free. Daniel smirked, adding, We've been more than generous. I stared at them, stunned, my heart pounding. Generous, I whispered. After all I sacrificed for you? Evelyn pushed her chair back and said the words that made my blood freeze. If you don't like it here, you can leave. Leave? My own daughter asking me to leave the home I had helped her build? I shook my head, clutching the photo of my husband. No, this is my family too. I won't leave. Her eyes narrowed, cold, unrecognizable, and then she did something I never thought possible. She reached for her phone and dialed building security. What I discovered next changed everything. The knock on my door came just minutes later. Heavy, authoritative. Ma'am, you'll need to come with us. Two security guards stood there, hands folded in front of them. My daughter was behind them, arms crossed, her face hard as stone. Daniel hovered beside her, lips curled in a smug half-smile. She doesn't live here anymore, Evelyn told them flatly, as though I were some stranger who'd wandered in off the street. Escort her out. I froze, clutching the framed photo of my late husband. My voice cracked. This is my home too. My name is on. Stop it, Mom. She snapped, cutting me off. Don't embarrass yourself. Chloe peeked from the hallway. Her wide brown eyes, once full of love for me, looked confused now. And then, worse, they turned away. She ducked behind the wall, as though ashamed to see her grandmother thrown out. My knees trembled. I whispered, Evelyn, how could you? But she wouldn't meet my eyes. The guards took me by the arms, not roughly but firmly enough that resistance was useless. They marched me past neighbors who stopped and stared, past the doorman who had once tipped his hat at me kindly, out into the bitter Manhattan night, where yellow cabs rushed by and the wind cut through my coat like knives. I stood there on the sidewalk, shaking, humiliated, betrayed. I wanted to scream, to claw at the glass walls of that penthouse, to force them to see me. But all I could do was sink onto a bench nearby, my body crumpled, my chest heaving. That was the first betrayal, but it wasn't the last. Because the very next day when I tried to call Evelyn, she didn't answer. I left messages, dozens, begging, pleading. Please, honey, let's talk. Please, I don't understand. Silence. Daniel picked up once. His voice was dripping with sarcasm. You should get used to being on your own. It's about time. Click, I was erased. Days passed. I stayed in a cheap motel, the kind with buzzing neon lights and thin blankets that smelled of bleach. Every night I lay awake replaying her words. You don't own anything here. But deep down I knew she was lying, because I remembered. Years ago, when she and Daniel first bought that penthouse, they didn't have enough for the down payment. Evelyn had come to me, eyes wide with panic. Mom, please, we'll lose the place if you don't help. I had emptied nearly my entire savings, every penny I'd scraped together after decades of hard work. And now, she dared to say I owned nothing? I kept calling, writing letters. I even tried visiting Chloe's school once, hoping to catch her at dismissal. When she saw me, her little face lit up, until Evelyn appeared, yanking her away. Stay away from my family, she hissed. My heart shattered. I felt like a ghost haunting the city. No one cared. No one saw. The people I had given my soul to had turned me into nothing. But it got worse. One afternoon, I bumped into an old neighbor who lived in the same building as Evelyn. She lowered her voice and said, "I'm so sorry about what happened. Everyone's talking about it." I frowned. Talking about what? She hesitated. Evelyn told people, well, she said you were confused, that you'd been showing signs of dementia, that you wandered the halls and caused trouble. She said you'd already moved to assisted living. I felt the air leave my lungs. Dementia? Lies. She was poisoning my name, spreading rumors to cover her cruelty. I staggered back to the motel, barely able to breathe. I stared at the mirror, whispering to my reflection, "Is this what they want? To erase me completely? To bury me while I'm still alive?" The phone rang. My hands shook as I answered. It was Chloe's voice, trembling. "Grandma, are you okay?" Tears rushed to my eyes. "Chloe, oh, sweetheart." But before I could finish, Evelyn's voice thundered in the background. "Hang up that phone right now." The line went dead. I broke. I screamed into the silence. I punched the thin motel pillow. I sobbed until my chest ached. My own child had turned my granddaughter against me. My life's love, my sacrifices, all twisted into lies. But still, there was more cruelty waiting. A week later, I returned to the building. I needed to retrieve the rest of my things. I thought maybe, just maybe, Evelyn would let me in for that. The doorman wouldn't meet my eyes. He held up his hand. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. You're not permitted inside." "Not permitted?" I gasped. "This is my daughter's home." He leaned closer, voice low. "She had your name taken off the guest list. Permanently." I stumbled back, banished. Not just from her home, but from her world. I begged him, "Please, just one chance. Let me talk to her." But Evelyn herself appeared in the lobby. Her heels clicked on the marble floor, her face a mask of icy rage. She looked me up and down like I was a stranger off the street. "Don't ever come back here," she said. "You're done, Mom. Finished." Daniel smirked beside her. "Security already knows. If you show up again, we'll call the police." The police, my own family threatening to have me arrested. Neighbors whispered. I could feel their eyes stabbing into me, pitying me, mocking me. I turned and walked out, my head low, the photo of my husband clutched against my chest. That night, I sat on the motel bed, numb. My entire body felt hollow, as if my soul had been sucked out. My mind screamed, why? Why would my own child do this? And then, as I unpacked the last of my things from the battered suitcase, I found it. An envelope. Yellowed, tucked deep in the lining of the bag. Inside were papers, old property documents, investment receipts, and account records with my name boldly printed. Proof of everything I'd given. Proof I wasn't senile. Proof I wasn't helpless. My hands shook as I held them, and in that moment, something shifted. The tears dried. The humiliation hardened into rage. They thought I was powerless. They thought I'd vanish quietly. But I wasn't going to disappear, not anymore. What I discovered in that envelope changed everything. I sat there on that sagging motel bed, the city roaring outside my window, clutching those papers like they were my last lifeline. My eyes scanned the faded ink, my name clear on every page. Ownership shares, transfers, investments, documents from years ago when I gave Evelyn money to help secure that apartment. I wasn't senile. I wasn't a burden. I was part of that home. My sacrifices were written in black and white. But what good were papers when my own daughter had turned the world against me? For days, I drifted through the city like a ghost. I walked the streets of Manhattan past glittering storefronts and rushing crowds, feeling invisible. People brushed by without a glance. No one knew I had once raised a daughter with every drop of strength in my body. No one cared. At night, I lay in that motel, staring at the ceiling. My chest ached from the betrayal. I thought of my husband, his voice echoing in my memory. Protect her, no matter what. Had I failed him? Had I failed myself? There were moments I nearly gave up. One night, I found myself sitting on a bench near Central Park, freezing wind slicing my cheeks. I watched wealthy couples hurry past, laughing, their fur coats gleaming under the streetlights. And I wondered, would anyone notice if I simply never got up again? But then, as I shivered, I overheard two women passing by, their voices sharp. "Money can cover anything in this city," one of them said. "As long as you can pay, people will believe your story." The words lodged in my mind like a spark in the dark. Money, power, lies. That was how Evelyn had erased me. By spinning stories, by buying silence, by twisting truth into whatever she needed it to be. But I still had truth. I still had proof. I clutched my bag tighter, my fingers brushing against the envelope. Maybe I wasn't powerless after all. The very next morning, I marched into a law office. My coat was shabby, my eyes swollen from sleepless nights, but I held my head high. The receptionist gave me a once-over, clearly unimpressed, but when I spread those papers on the counter, her expression changed. An attorney agreed to meet me. He leafed through the documents, eyebrows lifting higher with each page. "Mrs. Harris," he said slowly, "these are solid. If what you're telling me is true, your daughter and her husband may have committed fraud. You have rights here." My heart thudded. Rights. I wasn't a ghost. I wasn't finished, but I didn't want just legal battles. I wanted them to feel what I felt. The shame, the humiliation, the exposure. That night, I called an old friend from my working days. Her name was Linda. She had once been a young reporter when I cleaned the newspaper offices at night. I'd sneak her sandwiches, and she'd tell me about her dreams of uncovering corruption. "Linda," I whispered into the phone, "what if I told you I had a story about betrayal, about family, about money, about a woman thrown out into the cold by her own blood?" There was silence on the line, then her voice, "Tell me everything." And so I did. For hours I poured my heart out. The sacrifices, the humiliation, the lies Evelyn had spread about dementia, the jewelry that vanished, the forged stories. Linda listened, really listened, and when I finished, she said something that lit a fire inside me. "They tried to erase you, but with your proof and my pen, we can erase them." The plan began to take shape. Quietly, carefully, I would smile when I saw them, pretend to be weak, pretend to be defeated. Meanwhile, I would gather everything, receipts, recordings, witnesses. Every cruel word, every mocking laugh, every sign of fraud. Because one day, the world would see the truth. And when that day came, my daughter and her husband would finally know what it felt like to be thrown out. Stripped of dignity, stripped of power, exposed under the bright, unforgiving lights of justice. For the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. Not because I was healed, but because I had a purpose. They thought they had buried me, but they had no idea I was the seed, and soon I would rise. The first time I stepped back into that apartment building, I felt every eye on me. The doorman stiffened as though he remembered the scene of me being dragged out by security weeks before. But this time, I wasn't trembling. I wasn't begging. I had Linda's recorder in my purse, my documents neatly organized, and a lawyer waiting for my call. When Evelyn opened the door, her face twisted in shock. "Mother," she hissed, "what are you doing here? Didn't I make it clear?" I smiled. "Relax, dear. I just came to visit my granddaughter. You wouldn't deny me that, would you?" For a moment, suspicion clouded her eyes, but then she smirked. "Fine, but don't cause a scene." Inside, the apartment was just as I remembered. Gleaming counters, expensive art, cold and soulless. My granddaughter sat on the couch, eyes glued to her phone. She barely looked up. "Oh, you're back." Her voice was flat, but my heart didn't ache this time. I wasn't here for her approval. I was here for the truth. Over the next weeks, I played the part of the frail old woman, quiet, harmless, invisible. They thought I was defeated. They thought I was desperate to be let back in. They had no idea I was recording every word. "Your mother's losing it again," Evelyn would sneer to her husband. "She should be grateful we even let her breathe under our roof." Click, recorded. "Sell the jewelry before she notices it's gone. No one believes a senile old hag anyway." Click, recorded. "I swear, if she so much as touches my wine glasses, I'll call security again." Click, recorded. Piece by piece, I built my case. Linda's eyes gleamed each time I handed her a new file. She began writing, weaving my pain into an article that cut like a blade. Then came the day of reckoning. It started with the lawyer's letter delivered right to their doorstep. Evelyn and her husband paled as they tore it open. My ownership documents were laid out in black and white, demanding legal recognition of my share in the apartment. "You can't be serious," Evelyn screamed at me that night, her face red with rage. "You're nothing. No judge will believe you." I tilted my head. "We'll see." The next morning, Linda's article went live. Headlines splashed across the paper and online. Elderly mother forced out of her own home by her daughter. Within hours, the story spread. Neighbors whispered in the hallways. Old friends from church called me, horrified, offering support. Social media burned with outrage. How could anyone treat their mother this way? Evelyn tried to spin it, of course. She painted me as unstable, claimed I was making up lies, but the recordings told another story. When Linda released the audio, Evelyn mocking me, her husband bragging about selling my jewelry, the backlash was brutal. Her social circle turned its back. Her colleagues whispered. Even her so-called friends stopped inviting her to gatherings. One afternoon, I watched from across the street as movers carried boxes out of their apartment. Evelyn stood on the curb, shrieking into her phone, her husband's face pale as chalk. The apartment board had voted. With the scandal, with the legal mess, they weren't welcome anymore. Poetic, isn't it? The same way they had thrown me out with security guards, they now stood abandoned, their perfect life in ruins. And me? I walked back into that building with my lawyer at my side. The doorman opened the door for me this time, his eyes soft with respect. I wasn't just returning to four walls and a roof. I was reclaiming my dignity, my voice, my life. As for Evelyn, she avoided me after that. When we crossed paths, her eyes dropped to the floor, shame burning in her cheeks. And my granddaughter? Slowly, cautiously, she began to reach out. Perhaps she realized who had truly loved her all along, but whether she did or didn't, it no longer defined me. Because I had shown them and the world that I was not invisible, and I would never be erased again. When I sit by the window now, sipping my tea, I sometimes think back to that night when security dragged me out like I was nothing. The cold pavement, the humiliation, the way my own daughter's voice dripped with contempt. It used to haunt me. But not anymore. Because that moment, as cruel as it was, became the fire that forced me to rise. If they hadn't pushed me down so hard, I might never have found the strength to fight back. The apartment is quiet now, too quiet sometimes. My granddaughter visits once in a while, shy, unsure, guilty perhaps. I welcome her with warmth, but I no longer cling. She will have to decide for herself the kind of person she wants to be. Evelyn and her husband? They're gone, out of that shiny building, out of their fancy circle, out of the life they built on cruelty and lies. I don't know where they went, and truthfully, I don't care. For once their choices have consequences, and me, I found peace. My lawyer helped secure my rightful share of the property. My name, once erased, is etched firmly on the deed again. Neighbors who once turned away now smile at me in the lobby. Some whisper apologies, ashamed they believed the worst. Even strangers have written letters. Readers of Linda's article who saw my story and told me they cried, that they called their mothers that night, that they realized families should never be taken for granted. That, perhaps, is the sweetest revenge of all. My pain became a warning. My betrayal became a lesson. My voice, once silenced, now echoes far beyond these walls. Do I forgive Evelyn? No, forgiveness is earned and she has never tried, but I let go of the burden she placed on me. Her cruelty no longer controls me. What I hold on to instead are the truths I discovered. That dignity cannot be stolen, that even the weakest voice can roar when pushed to the edge, and that sometimes revenge isn't about destroying the other person, it's about reclaiming yourself. So when people ask me now, how did you survive being thrown out by your own family? I tell them this: I didn't just survive, I turned their betrayal into my power. And I lean back, sip my tea, and smile, because the day Evelyn called security to throw me out was the day she lost everything. And it was the day I finally realized I had everything I needed all along.